Welcome back. Today we're bringing you top stories from around the world and across the U.S. From North Korea's missile test to new U.S. job data, let's dive into the latest headlines. North Korea conducts record-breaking ICBM test. Starting with North Korea, where recent missile testing has set a new record for the country's ICBM program. North Korea launched an intercontinental ballistic missile earlier this week that stayed airborne for 86 minutes, the longest recorded flight in the country's missile history. The missile, launched from an area near Pyongyang, traveled approximately 620 miles before landing near Japanese waters, reaching a peak altitude of 4,050 miles. Analysts believe this steep launch angle demonstrates a potential range capable of reaching the U.S. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un commented on the achievement, saying the new missile demonstrates North Korea's irreversible position in nuclear delivery capability. Trump's controversial remarks on Liz Cheney. In U.S. political news, former President Donald Trump sparked backlash with recent comments about former Congresswoman Liz Cheney. At a rally, Trump called Cheney a radical war hawk and suggested putting her with a rifle to see how she feels when guns are trained on her. Cheney responded, stating that this rhetoric represents how dictators destroy free nations. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris's campaign has also weighed in, arguing Trump's words go beyond typical political discourse. Trump's campaign, however, says his comments are being taken out of context, framing the backlash as fake media outrage just days before the election. U.S. job growth nearly stalls in October. Switching to the economy, U.S. job growth slowed considerably in October, with non-farm payrolls rising by only 12,000 jobs, a sharp contrast to the projected 115,000 jobs expected by economists. This slowdown has been linked to strikes in the aerospace industry and weather disruptions in the Southeast. Strikes at Boeing and Textron significantly impacted the manufacturing sector, leading to a 44,000 job loss in transportation equipment. Despite these losses, healthcare and government sectors added positions, with 52,000 and 40,000 jobs, respectively. While job growth faltered, average hourly earnings rose by 0.4%, and the Federal Reserve is expected to announce a rate cut soon to help support the economy. Mexican Supreme Court justices resign amid judiciary overhaul. In Mexico, 8 Supreme Court justices have resigned, objecting to a new judicial overhaul that mandates elections for Supreme Court positions in 2025. The overhaul was introduced by President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, shifting the traditional Senate-appointed process to one that requires popular election. Supporters, including López Obrador's successor, Claudia Sheinbaum, claim the reform will combat corruption in the judiciary. However, critics argue that it threatens judicial independence, with Mexico's Employers Association warning it endangers fundamental protections for citizens. The Supreme Court is expected to review the constitutionality of the reforms soon. Taliban imposes new restrictions on Afghan women's religious practices. Next, we turn to Afghanistan, where the Taliban has issued new restrictions on women's religious practices, prohibiting women from praying aloud or reciting the Quran in front of other women. Khalid Hanafi, minister of the Taliban's Ministry for the Propagation of Virtue and Prevention of Vice, stated that grown women are not permitted to recite the Quran publicly. This restriction is one of many morality-based laws that Afghan women have faced since the Taliban took power in 2021, impacting their access to public spaces, education, and employment. The Taliban's ministry has started a public awareness campaign to enforce these new regulations, which many argue place an unequal burden on women. Russian foreign minister criticizes U.S. involvement in Ukraine. Lastly, in global politics, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov made headlines after a recent speech criticizing the United States' involvement in Ukraine. Lavrov accused the U.S. of perpetuating conflict in Ukraine for its own interests, claiming Washington aims to destabilize Russia. Lavrov's remarks align with Russia's long-standing narrative that the U.S. uses Ukraine as a proxy, prolonging the war for strategic advantage. The speech drew a sharp response from the White House, with a spokesperson calling Lavrov's statements misleading and reiterating that U.S. support for Ukraine is solely aimed at defending Ukraine's sovereignty. As the conflict in Ukraine approaches 2 years, international tensions between the U.S. and Russia show no sign of easing. That's all for today's stories. From North Korea's latest missile tests to new restrictions in Afghanistan and evolving U.S.-Russia tensions, these events will shape global politics and economies in the coming months. Be sure to like and